Hello everyone. Thank you for waiting so patiently for us to be able to log on, and welcome to the very first session of a series of 5 sessions on Mi'kmaw culture and history. My name is Sabrina Whitman. I am the coordinator of Indigenous Affairs here at Acadia University. So this series we had originally hoped to have in person, but of course with COVID, we're not able to do that. And if we can kind of look at the positives of COVID, one of the positive things, of course, coming out of it is all of these virtual sessions. So we're enabled, this going virtual has enabled us to be able to reach a lot more people across the campus and across the province and around the world. So we're really excited to be able to have so many people joining us today in these discussions. The purpose originally was to have this in Mi'kmaw during Mi'kmaw History Month, which is in October. But all of our speakers who are phenomenal speakers over the next few weeks are quite busy during that month. And at the same time, as was brought up to us, why should we only focus on Mi'kmaw culture and identity 1 month of the year? It's important for us to have these conversations all of the time, and it's important for individuals to understand how we can integrate Indigenous culture and ways of being into our daily life on a consistent basis. So this speaker series really connects to 2 primary initiatives on campus. One is our response to the calls to action for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And the other aspect is the 2025 strategic plan at Acadia University. One of its pillars is focused on Msitnogama, which is a Mi'kmaw word meaning all my relations. And again, it's about ensuring that Indigenous ways of being are integrated on campus and are an aspect of the institution itself. So the speaker series, all of the topics that were selected for discussion are really focused on issues that are of concern to students or faculty and staff on campus. This series, or this session, I should say in particular, Nadumalik and Two-Eyed Seeing, is really aimed at researchers, individuals in the sciences, or anyone studying at the university itself to understand how important our ways of knowledge are, and that they're as important as Western ways and approaches. So we have 2 really great speakers today, who I will introduce in a moment. I have a lot of individuals I have to thank during this session, which I will leave to the very end, but I do want to acknowledge that the Department of Community Culture and Heritage in the Province of Nova Scotia has funded this event so that we can provide an honorarium to each of our speakers for their time during these sessions. So a huge thank you to the province for this support. And this is an initiative between Glooscap First Nation and Acadia University. So it's a partnership between the 2. So our 2 speakers today are Trevor Gould and Clifford Paul. They're 2 individuals who I go to for their support all of the time. They're incredibly knowledgeable. I'm only sorry to say that we can't have them speak for hours on end, because they can talk for hours and they're really fascinating to listen to. For the structure, we're going to have Trevor speak first, and he's going to talk for about 20 to 30 minutes. Then we're gonna, while he's speaking, you can throw questions into the chat box, and we have a moderator watching that. And around the 30-minute mark, I'm gonna wrap Trevor up, and then we'll get into questions for, like I said, about 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll transition over to Clifford, who will speak a little bit more, talk about Nadumalik in a practical sense. And then we'll leave that for 10 to 15 minutes of questions directed specifically at him. And then if there are any other questions at the end, we'll have broad open questions. With the technology, we can't have both of the speakers up on the screen at the same time. So if they are responding, you might see my face, and it will be like the Wizard of Oz, kind of an omnipresent voice in the background while we're trying to switch the cameras over to the speaker at that time. Hope everyone has patience with us, since, like I said, this is our first session. And so Without further ado, I would like to introduce Trevor Gould. As I said, he's an individual who I go to all of the time for his knowledge and support. Trevor is a drummer and a dancer as well. He works for the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaw at Mi'kmawey Debert. And I know a lot of people have reached out in October to ask, how can we support Indigenous peoples? This was during the lobster situation, and my response has always been contact the communities directly to see how you can help in broader ways if we're trying to address systemic issues. In Mi'kmawey Debert, they're trying to fundraise to build a building to basically a museum and a cultural space. So if you really want to help the Mi'kmaw, donate to Mi'kmawey Debert, learn about it a little bit more, and I'm sure Trevor can expand upon that and his role. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the floor over to Trevor.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Acadia, and thank you, Glooscap, for inviting me to be part of this. It's a very humbling and honoring experience. My name is Trevor Gold. I'm from Paqtnkek Mi'kmaw Nation, and I work as a curatorial assistant at the Mi'kmawey Debert Cultural Centre. So again, as Sabrina was saying, if you would like to support, you can go onto our website or you can find us on Facebook. And we're in the process of fundraising money so we can continually to build our center, and we're almost there. So we're looking for every donation that we could get. And also that, I'd like to thank the Confederacy, and also like to thank Mi'kmawey Debert, because a lot of the information that I'm going to be talking to you, I learned on the job, and I learned through the projects that we do for people and for communities and for other organizations. I mean, I grew up with these concepts, but I got a better understanding for them as we researched, and we tried to educate and teach these organizations that we help with, and also these communities. So I've been asked to talk about these certain Mi'kmaq concepts, but before I do that, I just want to say that these are my understandings of these concepts. This is what I've been taught, and this is what I've learned in my experience in my lifetime regarding these certain concepts. And of course, someone else is going to have a different take on it, or a different way. As you'll see right after I'm done talking, Clifford is going to give you his take on Netukulimk and these concepts as well. So what I mean by saying that is that, just because I'm Native, I'm a Mi'kmaq person that grew up in a community, and I grew up practicing these concepts. What I say is not, set in stone. There are many teachings with everything. And when it comes to these things, especially these concepts, it's important to keep an open mind, and to be welcome into every kind of way of understanding these concepts, especially two-eyed seeing, because that is the basis of it. So before I go into talking about Netukulimk or two-eyed seeing, one thing I'd like to get each and every one of you that are listening to understand, or to grasp, is the importance of the Mi'kmaq language. And I feel personally these concepts are rooted in our language. Unlike all the other languages that are spoken on this land that were created overseas, our language was created here, born of this land, like us. And in that being said, it connects not only our way of thinking, but our way of life. And it's a verb-based language, so it's very descriptive. So our language ties us to the land already. It ties our daily way of living. our language, our culture, our traditions are all tied in together to the land. In order to understand Netukulimk or Tuaitsean, I like to talk about the concept of Wejiscaliating. And this is the term that I'm just learning about. This is a word that I'm just starting to understand, and I'm still trying to get the grasp of it. But it's a term and a concept that we use to describe our connection of where we came from, where we sprouted from. Legislatic is the idea of this is where we sprouted from. This is the place where we sprouted. This is the place where we grown. So this idea that Mi'kmaq people are part of the land, we were born of this land, is I think the key to understanding almost all Mi'kmaq concepts, I guess. To put it into kind of a perspective, I guess it's kind of like this circle of life. Picture Mufasa telling Simba about the Pride Lands, and everyone's connected in this beautiful circle of life. That's exactly what these concepts are talking about. I like the idea that my ancestors and my family were born on this land and from this land, and we can tie our connections to it, which makes our language so important. So, what just happened? Did I lose you? Oh, I thought I got disconnected. Okay, sorry. So I'll go right into the idea of Netukulimk, I guess, and my understanding of it and how I grew up with it. I'm from a community where Netukulimk is not a word that we grew up hearing, but the traditions and practices within our community was very rooted in the idea of Netukulimk. So I grew up salmon fishing in a traditional way, and I grew up fishing eels and trout and smelts. I grew up on the river and I grew up on the ice, and I was never educated on the word because it was just something that we never had to talk about openly with each other, because this idea exists and is rooted in our community. So today, especially with everything that's going on, Netukulimk is a concept and a word that is thrown around a lot and is shared and is used, I guess, for educational purposes when we're trying to teach non-Aboriginal people about our way of life. Netukulimk is basically the word that we used for sustainability. It's very broad saying that what sustainability, what is it, where? I like to think that everything that we do to eat and to provide for ourselves, when it comes to either hunting or fishing, these are all gifts from the Creator. And if you can take these gifts from the Creator, let it be fish, birds, animals, plants, anything that is born of this land, without compromising the ecological integrity in which you're taking it from, that I believe is the root of Netukulimk. That's like, if you're trying to put it in a nutshell and you're trying to describe it to someone, that's really what Netukulimk is. Not taking for granted and not taking advantage those things that were given to us naturally. All the animals that we harvest, all the fish that's in the rivers and the oceans, all the birds, anything that was there given to us. if we take those gifts, use them in a good way, use them in a proper way, without compromising the population, compromising their habitat and the future outcome of these species, let it be animals or plants, insects, whatever it is, that is what Netukulimk is about. And if you acknowledge this understanding, this way of thinking, that we can't compromise or take advantage of these species, you're acknowledging that everything has a spirit. Everything has a spirit. And that spirit has a place and purpose within this natural cycle of life on this planet. This is also a way, like the important part of Netukulimk is also accepting that you're not any superior to any of these species, to these plants, animals, fish. You're not superior to them. We're all in this circle. We're all connected, and we need each other. We need each other to survive as equals. We may have a better way of thinking, and we may, live a little bit more intelligent, I guess, but that doesn't make us any superior than the moose or the salmon, or the eels, or any of the birds. Without each of us playing our part into this great natural cycle that's been going on for thousands of years, we would not be able to survive. This is kind of a way of living that's been happening here for thousands of years. As old as our language, as old as anyone has been living here. And for thousands of years, this way of thinking, this way of life has been essential to our way of continuing that life. I don't like to say survival. A lot of people like to say this is key to survival. And I don't think that's, in some ways that is true to say that we followed this way to continue to survive, but I don't like to think it like that. I think it's just a way of continually to live in a good way, in peace and harmony. It was our way of understanding. Growing up for me, how I was taught about it, I started salmon fishing at an early age. And I remember being on the river with my stepfather and my uncle and my godfather. When we get to a pool where there'd be lots of salmon, we could take all of that salmon. It'd be easy to. But these older gentlemen that taught me this practice would always say, you only need one. Each of us would go and grab one salmon each. And there still would be, 20, 30 in this pool. You only take what you need. You leave some for tomorrow. That was my dad's words when it came to talking about Netukulimk. So we need some for tomorrow. What he meant by tomorrow, and I used to take that very literally, but what he meant by it was that we need some for next year. We need to make sure that these salmon come back, that they spawn, and that they continue to do that. We need some for the generation after you and their generation after them, and so on and so on and so on, for our ancestors. That's, we could talk for, like what Sabrina was saying, these are topics that we could talk about for hours on. And for people that don't have a really good understanding of how our language works, sometimes this could be a hard concept to grasp. But these words that I'm telling you is kind of a watered down Reader's Digest version of it, I guess. To really understand Netukulimk in a contemporary sense, I think it's good to approach two-eyed seeing, which is probably why Acadia and Sabrina, they put these two concepts together, because it's to understand not just Netukulimk and also Wet'suwet'en. To understand these, you have to look at it from a different point of view or a different way of thinking. I'm still learning about two-eyed seeing. I'm still trying to grasp it myself. And I take no credit for what I'm about to say, because like with Netukulimk as well. But this concept was a concept that was brought to us, to the public, to the people, to the education learning world by an elder in Eskasoni by the name of Albert Marshall. Thing to understand about Albert is that he's a residential school survivor, and he's a great researcher, great holder of knowledge, and a great mind when it comes to understanding these concepts and how we can teach people these concepts, but also at the same time learning about them in a different way. He himself doesn't like taking ownership. Like, if you listen to any of his stuff on the internet, or if you had the opportunity to hear him speak, he always starts by saying that he does not take any credit for bringing this concept of two-eyed seeing to life. And being from the residential school, where he came from a community as a speaker, you know, the language is in his head, the language is in his mind. He grew up with these traditions of fishing and hunting. And then while in residential school, he's forced to think in a different way. He's forced to learn in a different way. So how he continued to tell himself, how do I continue to keep these traditions that were passed down to me by my grandparents and my great grandparents and all my ancestors that came before me? How do I keep this in my mind and keep the traditional way of thinking while learning this other way? So this is my understanding of what two-eyed seeing is, and got to kind of take it, I guess, metaphorically, I guess. So, like, when you're trying to grapple these concepts, but not just these concepts, but also when you're learning about language, or you're learning about traditions and customs, or anything that's indigenous, try to look at it from this point of view. So think of it as you got two eyes. This one eye here is filled with those thousands and thousands of year-old teachings and oral histories and educations that have been passed down from our ancestors since time immemorial. Practices and a way of life that our people have been able to continue on this land and make this land a sustainable place, and to be able to do that for thousands of years. All of those teachings, all of that way of life is right here. And on this side is this new, for Indigenous people, it's new. This is a non-Indigenous way of looking at the world, with science and with universities and our present day education system. non-Indigenous way of looking at it through science and everything else. This here, it's in this eye. So when you're tackling this subject, I guess, you look at it through these both eyes. And out of these both eyes, you try to create this one perspective that's not biased. It's an unbiased way of looking at everything. I think this was a very important way of thinking and concept to start teaching people because of how Albert grew up. Not just him, thousands of Indigenous kids and children all across this country had this same problem. And this is the reason why this concept is so important today, is because our youth like the way I grew up, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s as a kid. And if I was able to have these concepts taught to me, I would have a little bit of a better understanding. But in today's society, the generation of youth now are having very, very unique and different ways of learning about the world than any of us did. The kids that are going to be going into high school or in university in the next few decades have a very unique way of learning about everything, which is why two-eyed seeing really is a concept that was kind of made for them, because their knowledge is constantly changing. The way knowledge is being delivered to them based in this non-Indigenous traditional way, I guess, this whatever's coming from this eye. But at the same time, we are trying to sustain our way of life. We're trying to keep our language here. We're trying to keep those traditional ways of hunting and fishing. We're trying to keep those intact. But how do you do it when we're living in the modern world? When the communities that we live in deal with non-Indigenous organizations every day. We speak a language that is not normally our own. So the majority of us think not in our Indigenous language, but a lot of us do. So incorporating two-eyed seeing into the way we learn is kind of, I think Albert and his wife Medina, I think they believe that this was essential to a different way of learning for our youth. And this is something that we need to continually to tackle and continually to promote and continually to help people understand. Because if you take the opportunity to appreciate what two-eyed seeing is trying to tell you, then when you learn about all these other concepts, when you try to get a better understanding, you have a different way. The thing about two-eyed seeing, and again, this is just my opinion, is that I don't think it's meant to look at everything. It's not look to kind of question its integrity in our natural world, or question anything based on its, like, as a subject or as a word or as a concept, but instead it kind of gives you the idea as the individual. Yeah, that's the important thing about two-eyed seeing, is that it gives you that individual way of thinking. I guess I hope that makes any sense. Because as an individual, we have this inherent responsibility to understand something that reflects my world and my culture. And not just Indigenous people. I feel like everyone has that right. I think that's all I got for two-eyed seeing. I guess another thing to try to understand as well is that, you know, for decades, if not centuries, especially here in the Maritimes, Nova Scotia, you know, this part of Canada, Mi'kmaq people have been disconnected from our traditions and language for a long time. It has impacted our youth, especially, you know, right from when settlers came, all through residential school to right now. All of these issues and all these factors play into what's happening now with how our youth are learning. They and I only can speak by experience, I guess, when it comes to this, the way it has impacted youth, I guess. You know, growing up, I was always questioning who am I? How do I belong in this community? How do I belong as an Indigenous person? Where do I come from? Why am I here? And it took me going to university. It didn't take me, but going to university and learning about these concepts in a different way, I guess. You know, I don't think anyone knows the answers to those questions. It's a daily thing that you're constantly learning about. But concepts like this helped our people discover that, you know. So going back to Netukulimk, I guess. Now that you have a little understanding of what two-eyed seeing is and how important it is when it comes to tackling not just concepts. Again, take this idea of two-eyed seeing and, oh, the man is here. Take this idea that I've told you of like two-eyed seeing in a nutshell, and every time that you're approached about a new way, you know, even an issue, a subject, history, let it be history, let it be contemporary, let it be about language. If you're about to learn anything about Indigenous people, keep this in mind. For hundreds of years, our history has been written from a non-Indigenous point of view. So that's changing now. That's changing now because of a lot of people that do research and a lot of people that do this type of work. I think they're getting a better understanding of two-eyed seeing. Whoever you are, all the hundreds of people there that are listening. I only see 2 people, so, but I was told there's a couple hundred of you. I hope understanding. I hope whatever little information that I can tell you about my understanding of what two-eyed seeing is will help you when you're learning about these concepts, especially of Wejiscaliatic, especially of Netukulimk. So when it comes to, I think I'm almost at the end, Sabrina. What I like to end here and get across, I guess, is Netukulimk is been an important important word and concept that we've been hearing a lot, because it, like I said, it encompasses our idea of sustainability. But like I said in the beginning, that there is a very broad way of looking at the concept, because it's more than just sustainability. It's more than that. It's more than a word. It's more than a concept, but it's kind of like a way of life. There's like this unwritten law that governed our way of understanding our place in this natural cycle, that we were able to keep going in a peaceful way for thousands of years. For thousands of years living here. In the 1700s, when the treaties were signed by our people and the British Crown, a lot of people assumed that was about land. That was about giving up, or being wards of the government, or being subjects to the crown. Our people signed these agreements because they were protecting Nadumalik. I truly believe that. I feel, as a researcher and a historian, I feel like that's what the whole purpose of creating peace and friendship with non-Indigenous people in the 1700s was yes, we need to stop conflict. Yes, we need to stop fighting so both of us continue living here, but we need to make sure that we are protecting this way of life. Yeah, the treaties say that we want the right to be able to fish and hunt for time immemorial, but that's Nadumalik. That was our Nadumalik. And to be able to protect that, and to be able to foresee the future, our ancestors were doing us a big. Sorry, my computer keeps sending me stuff. Our ancestors were looking out for us in a big way by making these agreements and making sure this way of life was protected. That's the important part of understanding these old treaties that were signed by our people and the British Crown. It's to protect and to keep Nadumalik alive. So our ancestors and ancestors and ancestors continue living that way, because we've did that for thousands of years. And the plan is to be able to keep doing that for thousands more. So I'm Trevor Gould. This is my TED Talk.
So Trevor, we've got 2 questions for you before we hand it over to Clifford after. So the first question is, I'm just going to read it what they said. I said, I love your story of taking what you need when salmon fishing. How can we share this message with our children now when their world is so saturated in things to consume? I see smoke coming out of you.
Someone muted me, or someone, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. That's a good question. I think it needs to be in the conversation. You know, these types of things, the only way that I learned about them is because I lived them every day. You know, when it came to salmon fishing, I didn't have to be told, because I lived it. You know, sometimes you're told once and you see the action, and then you see other people doing it, and it's just this thing that becomes normal to you. So it has to be part of the everyday conversation. These things you have to talk to your friends, your family, your children. If you want them to continually to learn about it, you need to continually to talk about it. All of these issues that are happening today, the only way that we're going to continually to learn, the only way that our children in schools right now are going to learn about this, is that if it becomes part of our everyday conversation. I went to elementary in a it was a mixed school, you know, and I never learned any of this as a kid in elementary or in high school or university. I didn't learn any of this. None of this was talked about. Being an Aboriginal Indigenous community that's only about, 5 kilometers down the road, they never talked about these concepts or the way of life that we had in our community. So hopefully that changes now, and hopefully that students will learn about these concepts and these things in a different way. So like I said, it has to be in our conversation, I guess. That's the only way that we're going to continue to learn. And how you tell your child that's your thing. You the parent.
So Trevor, another question from the same person is, and I know my response to this, but I think we'd probably be in the same place, but would two-eyed seeing only be for Indigenous learners?
No, definitely not. That's the whole idea of two-eyed seeing, how do we carry our concepts how do we get non-Indigenous people to understand our concepts in a way that they understand, or the way that they know. If anything, two-eyed seeing is really directed towards non-Indigenous people,
Exactly, and I'm going to tune into that too, or just chime in, is I think that's what we really want individuals to understand, is to value our learning systems, our knowledge systems, as equal to Western knowledge systems. So in particular, people working in science, but in general, is to integrate our ways of being. And as Trevor said, it really is Western learners too who have to understand this and look at the world that way, and not just look out of a single lens. We have 3 more questions that I'll throw to you, and then we'll head over to Clifford. This one's from Cindy. She says, I have heard some elders speak about considering 7 generations that came before and the 7 generations that are to become before acting. Is this part of the two-eyed seeing, or a different concept altogether?
I think the 7th generation theory prophecy is I think, and someone may think otherwise, but I believe it comes from another nation, and that's like a lot of customs and a lot of ceremonies and a lot of traditions we've adopted here and I don't want to call it pan-Indigenous way of thinking, because it's not. It belongs to a nation, belongs to someone's way of living, I guess, and the way of thinking, but it's something that we have adopted here. I really don't know how to answer that, but I like to. I don't think the 7th generation, the 7th generation fires, or prophecy, or that way. I don't think it was born of this land. I don't think it originated here, but it's something that we've adopted, and something that we've clung on to and incorporated into our contemporary traditional customs, I guess. But when it comes to two-eyed seeing, I don't think that's essential in your understanding. I don't think that's really essential in the way that you look at two-eyed seeing or any of these concepts.
So we have, there's one question that I'm not going to throw to you, Trevor, because it's more about hunting and fishing. And I think Clifford could answer that more when he speaks with moose management.
But I hunt and fish. I do that stuff.
I know you do too, but it's about modern technology applied to hunting and fishing. And I think you can answer that afterwards. I'm going to throw it to Clifford later, and then you guys can both answer it. But the question I have for you, since you're always in the schools talking to students, I think this is a prime question for you, as much as all of the other ones are. But as a non-Indigenous educator, how can I create a healthy learning environment for all my learners, acknowledging Nadumalik and two-eyed seeing?
Talk to your principal. Talk to your school board. On a serious note, like I said with the other question, these are concepts, like if you got to keep an open mind, that's for sure, but they have to be in the conversation. And in the next few years, treaty education is going to be a main thing in this province. And these concepts are going to be a big part of treaty education. And if there's a lot of educators online right now, you're already fully aware of what treaty education is and how important it is. So I guess trying to tackle it the same way that I just presented it, break it down and try to fully understand the concept yourself first. Don't try to teach a concept or a way of thinking without fully understanding it yourself. I guess I think that's the best answer that I could give. Learn about these things and learn about them in a good way. And I feel like if you're enthusiastic about it enough, then your students will be able to grapple it in a good way. Make sure that your school is on board and all that stuff. I really don't know, man. I'm not an educator in that sense. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Trevor. I know we'll have more questions later on at the end, and we'll throw it back out for general questions. I want to just note, Trevor did bring up about treaty education in the province of Nova Scotia. So out of the Office of Aboriginal Affairs, there is a directorate called Treaty Education, and they're working on, it's a multi-prong approach. It's about educating the public sphere, also educating bureaucrats within the provincial system, but the big focus that they have is on the education system. And they're really right now targeting primary and secondary education and working on a number of different initiatives within the school system. It's phenomenal work. It's a really small team working on it, but the work that's coming out of that directorate at the Office of Aboriginal Affairs it's phenomenal, and it's in partnership with our own sectoral body, MK. And it's an example, in my opinion, in the country of really solid work on treaty education. So it's just going to continue to build from there. As people are seeing through this session, you can see the banter between Trevor and I, and soon to be Clifford. You're seeing Mi'kmaw culture at its finest. We're all family and we interact and react to one another really well. And I wish the camera was on Trevor right now because he's going like this with himself. We're never very serious, but we talk about really serious topics all of the time. And the concept you heard me say earlier, Msitnogamam, all my relations, we're all family and we're all closely connected. And I consider them all my family, all of our speakers that we have here today and throughout the next 2 weeks of this series. The next speaker that we have that we'll be throwing over to in a minute is Clifford Paul. Clifford is from Membertou, and that's just outside of Sydney for those who don't know where our Mi'kmaw communities are located. And Clifford is the Moose Manager for the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources. Clifford and I have been working together for almost 10 years now when I was working in the negotiation office, and I look to him for his knowledge all of the time on these concepts. And he's done phenomenal work with moose management, and he'll elaborate on that a little bit more. But what has been done with moose management in the province of Nova Scotia is truly an example of Nadumalik. It's truly an example of what two-eyed seeing is all about, and the importance of valuing our knowledge systems for co-management of resources in this province. So when we talk about the peace and friendship treaties and that we are all treaty people, if you start to value our ways of being, you're going to see that it's actually going to make this province a stronger and better place. So with that, I'll hand the discussion now over to Clifford to talk a little bit more about these concepts and, like I said, all of the phenomenal things that he's done and UINR has done on moose management and other things related to this. So to Clifford. And Clifford, you're muted. Let's see if we can unmute you. Yep, you're unmuted now. There you go.
Perfect. Perfect. So hello, everybody. It's a miracle that I got in on here because of the programs I have on my computer are pretty archaic, I guess. And we managed to get in. It's like a scene from Mission Impossible that I'm here, but I'm here. And it's great to be here with an audience. I don't know how many people are in, but it's great to be presenting today. So you probably saw in the invitation, my name is Clifford Paul. I come from the First Nation community of Membertou, and I'm a proud grandfather, single parent of 5 adult children, and a proud grandfather of 11 grandchildren. And all those grandkids there, they gift from God, you know, they keep me active, they keep me busy, I guess, and they all have good manners, which is a gift from God. I don't know where they learned them, but hey, that's great. And they also love home cooking, and they love natural foods as well. That they, you know, that's a rarity. Don't get me wrong; they'll eat a double Big Mac, no problem. But they love natural food, and they prefer that. So that's basically who I am. I'm the Moose Management Coordinator for the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources. 16 years at that. It's my longest gig in my professional life. And it's one of those jobs that does not feel like it's a job. It's something I truly enjoy. So they say, if you want happiness in life, make sure your work is something that's enjoyable as that it doesn't actually feel like work. And traditionally, my name is Running Grizzly Bear Man. That's my spirit name, and I come from the Mi'kmaw district of Unama'ki. Unama'ki represents Cape Breton, and it does not translate to Cape Breton. Unama'ki means the land of the everlasting fog. So if you've ever been in Unama'ki, maybe 5 o'clock in the morning in the early summer day, and there's a fog that lifts that doesn't want to go away, that's what it's all about, the land of the everlasting fog. And Unama'ki is my homeland, my ancestral homeland, and it's one of the 7 traditional districts of our nation. So I am here to talk about Netukulimk from a management perspective, and also two-eyed seeing and how I incorporate two-eyed seeing in my work and in my lifestyle. Because I can say management, I can just say all these professional words, you know, co-management of our natural resources. I can say all these things, but really it's an extension, and you heard a lot of it up from Trevor, of how we interpret the natural world, how Netukulimk is an unwritten law, how it governs our behavior in the natural world. So it starts off, with Netukulimk and how we use it for management, and I'll go into two-eyed seeing. So Netukulimk, it's an extension of a Mi'kmaw way of interpreting natural world. It governs my behavior when I'm out there hunting, fishing, gathering medicines, picking berries, or even gathering materials for my crafts. It governs my behavior, and it's an extension of Mi'kmaw natural law. We got people trying to hunt moose in the summertime, and they are violating the concept of Netukulimk. They are violating Mi'kmaw natural law, which tells me that I have to harvest according to season, and I have to be in certain areas in my district and in other districts at certain times where the food value is incredibly at its peak, and I will intercept or join in with the birds, the mammals, and the fish at their peak food value, and at a time where I would not hurt or compromise the population. So historically, our families had a traditional governance structure. And today you can call that the Mi'kmaw Grand Council, the Sant de Maoyomi, and they organize the families. They'll organize the family groups, and they'll say, Clifford, your family will go here. When you're done there, you move on to this place. In the fall, you go to this place, and then you base your winter survival on your harvests. Our traditional leadership not dictated, they actually told you where to go, and they allowed us to match our migration patterns to the birds, the mammals, and the fish, and that we would meet each species at the peak of their food value and at a time where we would not be harming their populations. It was an incredible system, because we were able to keep our lands, our waters in such pristine condition. The Creator so loved the Mi'kmaw, the Ilnu, the humans of this land, that the Creator put us in a place that had incredible richness, incredible food. And we have to honor that by understanding in today's world the concept of Netukulimk. And we have an elder there from Paqtnkek. I always called him an elder, mentor, and friend, and he's only a few years older than me, Kerry Prosper, who talks about Nogama, how people will interpret that at the end of a prayer and say, all my relations. And yes, it includes my relations, my cousins, my uncles, my children, my grandchildren, my future heirs, and my ancestors. Those are my relations, but also the birds, the mammals, the fish, the insects, everything of Mother Earth. You know, everything that casts a shadow has spirit. Everything that has spirit deserves respect. So if you look at everything in my natural world, the birds, the mammals, the fish, the insects, the soils, the grasses, the waters, all these things, the particles that build those things through creation also builds me. And that with Netukulimk, I honor and respect the natural world because I extract, I take, and I share from the natural world to help with my survival and the survival of my family and the survival of my nation. So when I die, all those particles that made me go back into Mother Earth, and they serve to feed the particles that sustain me. I sustain them. It's the circle of life as you understand today. And when you think that way, you incorporate that thinking of Nogama. I am just as related to my brothers as I am to the trees, to the blades of grass, because when I say all my brothers and sisters, that includes the moose, it includes the fish, it includes the trees, the salmon, the water, the soils, all these living things that deserve our respect. They have spirit. There is a connection between that understanding, Netukulimk, two-eyed seeing, and how we push those thinkings forward into a portfolio on moose management. But I'll tell you right now, I am a terrible moose manager. I cannot manage moose. They don't listen to me, man. I try to say, go off that mountain. There's more food on that mountain. They won't go. They don't listen to me. I found out right away that I can't manage moose. So I had to look, what's the next best thing to manage That would be human behavior around moose, including our behavior. And we had a lot of young people who missed the benefit of two-eyed seeing, Imsit Nogama, Mi'kmaw natural law, and looked at our treaty rights as more individual than communal. And we had a situation where members of our communities were approaching salmon harvesting, moose harvesting, and I'll just use those two as an example, as a way to make a fast dollar. They were shooting moose to supply the demand for food for non-Aboriginal people, selling moose at a bargain basement price, virtually using your status card to prostitute your rights, basically, and selling your rights at a low end. And it was those circumstances that I was hired within to work to work within that change needed to be made. That our elders were saying, we're going to close Hunter's Mountain until the Mi'kmaw start taking a serious look at self-management. It was at a time where we had lots of moose, but we had lots of hunting that was not conducive to sustainability. And if it continued, it was not conducive to the Mi'kmaw way of interpreting the natural world. So I was hired under that scenario. And it's interesting because I was a student at Cape Breton University at a time where Albert created the phrase, the moniker, the understanding, the two-eyed seeing understanding. He gave it that name. And I was a student, I was learning the two-eyed seeing. And I started to realize my life as a Mi'kmaw person. And I started school at the age of 36. I worked all my life as a child, hard labor. My father was a drywaller. His father was a stonemason. They went from masonry work to plastering to drywall. And that was where I came in as a child. So I worked as a child, and I nonstop became a natural resource manager 16 years ago. Imagine that. And when I was hired, before I was hired, I was on this committee, and Chief Terry Paul asked me, Clifford, we need you to sit on a committee with Parks Canada. We need one committee on moose alone and management, and the other one is on the park itself. And I said, sure, I'll do that. Sure enough, I'll do that. And when I was into that, there was a point where they said, we need to hire a coordinator. And with all the abuses going on around our rights, I remember I was helping our committee to construct the parameters of what that position would look like. You know, this person's going to come in and make some incredible changes. And I always say this. I said, I pity the fool that gets that job. He or she is going to get beat up, shot, or both to bring those changes to Unama'ki. And the committee work ended. And I was doing other kinds of work. I was working for the tribal police for a few years. I worked for the Union of Nova Scotia Indians for a few years. I worked for the Micmac News back in the 80s and early 90s, did that for 11 years, along with the hard labor my father got me to do, you know. And there was a point in time where I became unemployed. And UINR were looking for a manager to manage moose in Unama'ki, a moose management coordinator. And I saw that thing, that posting, and I said, you know what? I pity the fool that gets that job. He or she is going to get beat up, shot, or both. So anyways, for some strange reason in my life, around that time, I became unemployed. And I was not used to that. I was addicted basically to work, any kind of work, hard labor, otherwise. And I was addicted to paychecks because that is the fruit of your labor. You know, you do good work, you get paid for it, I guess, and other things that come along. And I remember I was working on a drywall job with my dad. I was a little boy. I was drywalling, and I was doing it fast. I was doing the nail holes really quick. And these are one of the fancier houses in Sydney. And my father came up to me with his drywall trowel, tapped me on the back. He says, "Clifford, you better do a good job." And me, right proud of my work, you know. I said, "Dad, I'm doing a good job." He says, "No, you better do a good job. My name's attached to my work." Boom! That hit me, man. It didn't hit me hard then, but in life it hit me. If you look at my work at the Micmac News, my name's attached to that. If you look at the work I did with the Unama'ki Tribal Police, I was a criminal records manager and a dispatch trainer. If you look at the work I'm doing today, if you Google Moose Management in Cape Breton, my name is attached to that. So I was unemployed again, and I looked at position and I said, I pity the fool that gets that job. So I'm walking down the street one day, and my cousin picks me up. Very good friend of mine, cousin. You grew up with your first cousins. They're like your brothers and sisters. Really close family ties. And he says, "Let's go get coffee, Cliff. I'll buy you a coffee." I said, "Good, man. I'm broke. I'm not used to being unemployed." He says, "No, they're calling your name. They're calling your name." I said, "What are you talking about, bro?" He says, "UINR is looking for a moose management coordinator." And I said, "No, I don't want that job, man. Person who gets that job is going to get beat up, shot, or both. The work that has to be done." And he says, "No, you should apply." I said, "Since you told me, I'll offer tobacco and I'll pray on it. I'll pray." And then a couple weeks later, the deadline for that job is getting close. I'm not keeping an eye on that. Others are, I guess. And my brother Danny drives by in his truck, sees me walking. "Hey, Cliff, let's go for coffee." I said, "All right, let's go, man. I got no money." Says, "I know. I'll get you coffee." And my brother Danny is a pipe carrier. He's a visionary. He's a young elder. And at that time, he was much younger than he is today. But I still see him as a young elder back then. And he says, didn't waste no time telling me this. He said, "Clifford, I had a dream." I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm very interested in your dream. What did you dream of?" He pointed at me, just the way my father pointed at me. He says, "I dreamt you were doing great things with moose." And I'm like, boom. It's like a bolt of lightning went through my body. A big shiver. I don't have hair on my arms, legs, neck, but whatever hair was there stood up. You know what I mean? It stood up. And they said, "Danny, I've been praying on this job that UINR is offering. And I pity the fool that gets it because he or she is going to get beat up, shot, or both for the changes that being made." My brother says, "You go there today, put your name in." I said, "No problem." There, did my interview. After the interview, I said, "When will you know?" I'm the last person interviewed. And they said, the administrator there said, "Geskamali, you wait." So within 20 minutes, I got the job. And I was like, how could that be? And everything came together. I was brought in this position because of my approach to the natural world and how I use Netukulimk as a guide for me, not only for my life, but not only for my work in the natural world, not only for me being a food provider, but also in a professional sense. Because one of the questions they asked me in the interview, what's missing with our harvest today? And I tell them, the young people don't have any teachers. They hunt there, they're showing off, they're getting high, they're drinking, they're selling moose, they're trading moose for drugs, they're doing all these things. And they're basically selling their rights to the lowest bidder. And I told them what's missing is the spiritual connection. The spiritual element is not there anymore. It's there in some traditional harvesters, but we have to find a way to highlight these traditional harvesters and get them to be the teachers and to pass on the knowledge. And we've been doing that. Communities have been doing that, not through my instruction, but through my support. And things started to change in the Cape Breton Highlands. People started to realize I'm responsible for the next 7 generations. I am responsible for my children and grandchildren. I don't want to take my grandchild up to the mountain and tell them there used to be moose here, and the grandchild will look up and ask, Papa, what's a moose? You know, we didn't want to be in that situation. So things gradually started to change. And if you look at my moose management plan, it's not a document. It's an ongoing discussion between First Nations, community members, you know, the grassroots, with us as a management team, UINR, KMKNO, the Assembly of Nova Scotia Chiefs. It's one of those portfolios that is very active and is showing strong deliverables. Not because of me, it's because of I was able to promote a conversation within our communities. And when we went to the communities and we asked 2 basic questions, how would you like to see moose managed by the Mi'kmaw? And how would you like to see ecosystem and the resources managed by the Mi'kmaw? And our community members who grew up with mistrust of government, a mistrust of First Nations governments, and mistrust of the federal government, how are we going to convince them that we are working on their behalf and working in partnership with our community members? So our community members were, once we gained that trust, they were saying, oh, they need to do this. They need to do more patrols. They need to do this. They need to change this. And I'm listening, and we have a team writing this all down, you know, all these proceedings, this gathering of traditional knowledge, this gathering of Mi'kmaw input. And then after they all had said their piece, I asked, who is they? Who is they? Who are you implying when you say they? And they said, oh man, we are the they. We are, it's us. Yes, the management principles, the management considerations, all these things have to come from us. And the community members started to change their behaviors, and they started to do all these great things. And the great legacy of that is not a document that's going to go on a shelf, a Mi'kmaw Moose Management Plan that's going on a shelf and sit there. Oh, let's look up the Mi'kmaw Moose Management Plan. Let's see what they done. Oh yeah, it's in paper. No, the greatest thing about ours, it's an ongoing discussion with incredible deliverables. And the deliverables, you'll find them on KMKNO through their website. You'll find them on uinr.ca, our website. UINR TV on YouTube. You'll see that as well. Incredible deliverables. And when I tell people, they say, Clifford, how do you do your work plan? How do you plan? I say 70% of my work plan comes from the grassroots. All my deliverables come from the grassroots. It comes through that gathering of traditional knowledge. So from a management perspective, I can sit at a table with provincial counterparts and federal counterparts in Mi'kmaw government. And I can talk about Mi'kmaw jurisdiction, and I can talk about how the Mi'kmaw can assert that jurisdiction and use it to help us in our management of moose and moose habitat. And the government has to listen to us, because I remember, because I was a journalist at this time, everything the Mi'kmaq tried to do, government will use their laws against our laws. And that we went through this incredible litigation period from 1928 even to the present day of using our treaties to assert Mi'kmaq law. And that government had to understand that if you're going to fight the Mi'kmaq and if you're going to try to challenge their treaty rights, you're going to lose. So government now, we're in a position to say, told by the Supreme Court judges, it's time for you to start working with the Mi'kmaq. And it's time for you to listen to the Mi'kmaq. If you try taking them to court, you're wasting their valuable resources and you're wasting your valuable resources. Those are the parameters for which I was brought in. But I remember as a young man, as a journalist, going through that litigation phase, except for that 1928 case with Grand Chief Gabriel Syllaboy. I remember all these litigation, these Supreme Court decisions. And the government had come in and we work. Anything that was up for negotiation, there was a process for that. Anything beyond negotiation, how we can get things done, was done through Moose Management, Moose Working Committee, which incorporated the 3 levels of government. And I can sit in those meetings and I can say, my harvesters are telling me this, and they're asking DNR, Parks Canada, to help them with this understanding or with this situation. And I can say that. And as a young journalist in the 80s and 90s, there was no way you could sit with government and say what needed to be done. But because we had the momentum of those community sessions of gathering that knowledge and bringing it into the management perspective, it made it my work so much easier. And after going through all those communities, after talking with all these harvesters and community members, making changes, I never got shot, beat up, or both. It worked out well. And it was funny because when I got hired, the provincial government were saying, Clifford, they're telling the Mi'kmaq actually, oh, the Mi'kmaq have an unregulated hunt. They do not have a reporting system. They do not have a season, and they can hunt 365 days a year, blah, 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 blah. The Mi'kmaq need, and they're telling us this, a moose management plan. And I'm the guy who has to design this, newly hired. And then the federal government say, yeah, the Mi'kmaq have an unregulated season. They can hunt 365 days a year. They can go anytime. The Mi'kmaq need a moose management plan. So when we went to these communities and talked and spoke and gathered traditional knowledge, talked about Netukulimk, really learned from our harvesters what Netukulimk means, what Emslit Nogama means, we had that momentum. And we started to work on what a management plan should look like. Education is one of the strongest components. There's other pillars within that plan. Education is one of the stronger support pillars. And after we had the momentum of going to the communities and getting this traditional knowledge, this Netukulimk, this strong feature of our people, Netukulimk, we sat back with the governments and we asked the province, all right, we gathered information, we're ready to move forward. What do you have, my provincial counterparts? What do you, I can remember, you guys all know Eric Shiley, right? My counterpart, he's sitting there, okay, my friends, what do you have in your management plan that's going to assist us, the Mi'kmaq, with our management plan? And the province says, oh, you know what? We never been asked that question. We do not have a management plan per se. We work with UINR and Parks Canada, and we do a survey on moose. And from that survey, we determine how many non-Mi'kmaq harvesters are going to hunt moose that year. And we're like twisting our heads. All right, okay, you're telling us we need a management plan and you don't have one. So we asked our counterparts at federal counterparts at Parks Canada. It's like pinching somebody and twisting, you know, twisting, asking that question. Okay, our friends from Parks Canada, what do you have in your management plan that's going to assist the Mi'kmaq in their management plan, in our management plan? Because you're telling us we need a management plan on moose. And they said, oh, we've never been asked that question before. We do not have a management plan. We do not have a management plan, and that we work with UINR and the provincial government, and we come up with a number, and they use that number to determine how many non-Aboriginal people are going to hunt moose. So what happens is, they told us we need a plan, yet they did not have any. That was a paternalistic view. And from that moment on, we told them, now's the time for a comprehensive management plan on moose. Because if you look at a moose in the Cape Breton Highlands, it's not a provincial moose, it's not a federal moose, it's not a Mi'kmaq moose. A moose is a moose is a moose. And that we should work together on a comprehensive management plan on moose. And because of the work we did within our communities to gather traditional knowledge, we're able to lead. We're able to use Mi'kmaq jurisdiction and take a strong lead in that comprehensive management plan. So from a Netukulimk perspective on management, that is where the Mi'kmaq started, and that's where the Mi'kmaq are at this point. It's been a great gig. I call it a gig, even though it's part of my career as a Mi'kmaq person. It is a great gig, and the work is challenging and rewarding. And the way it fared out, it's not a management plan on paper. It's an ongoing discussion with our community members, our leaders, our traditional leaders, our elected leaders, and the federal and the provincial governments as well. It's an ongoing discussion. And if you look at what's going on in moose management, all other jurisdictions across Canada, North America, they're looking at us. They're looking at the Mi'kmaq, and they're asking, how did the Mi'kmaq achieve this? How did the Mi'kmaq get to this point? And Chief Terry Paul will always say, you know what? We take baby steps. We might be slow, but guess what? We're moving forward. And that portfolio on moose, I don't know, moose is sexy, I guess. It's one of those things. People have a strong connection to it. It's one of those things that allowed us to push that envelope far. And we will continue to do so. And I will continually be empowered because of my connection to our First Nation communities. Those providers, those people that adhere to, those people that taught me about Netukulimk, Two-Eyed Seeing, and Mi'kmaq Natural Law, Emsit Nogama, that propels not only me, it propels that movement, that portfolio. And some of you has had the great pleasure of working with us on that and seeing it and hearing it. And it is one of the shining examples of Mi'kmaq self-government, because when we went to those communities and it went from they to, oh, we should do this. That was a big turning point. And we're very lucky. We're able to have a healthy population, food distribution in our communities, youth hunts, elder hunts, community hunts, education, the feast in the Highlands, the hiring of Mi'kmaq DNR officers, all those things we're able to build. And we're able to maintain that relationship with Mother Earth and with the Moose people in a way that we did not negatively impact their populations, and in a way that we would see them, meet with them, intercept them at the peak of their food value, just the way our ancestors have done in modern times. And we're able to do that without a reporting system and without enforcement. The Mi'kmaq were able to achieve all these things that non-Mi'kmaq jurisdictions need to manage. They need enforcement. They need seasonality. They need reporting systems. The Mi'kmaq can do these things without those management tools because the management tools lie within the concept of Netukulimk and how we interpret the natural world. So I hope that part of that discussion that I just brought describes how Netukulimk is used in the management perspective. And we self-manage historically so very well. And today we're trying to bring that back. So Sabrina, I can go into 2-eyed seeing from here.
If you want, I mean, we've got 30 minutes. I know we have a few questions, but you do just such a phenomenal job of speaking and explaining things. And I know a lot of people participating would rather hear you for a little bit longer, and then we can go to more questions in the last 10 minutes. So if you want to go into 2-eyed seeing for about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm sure no one would mind listening to you. So please take it away, Clifford. Continue.
All right, thank you. My childhood was, I'm going into the 2-eyed seeing now. So, I had this incredible childhood. I had lived in a safe home. I spent a lot of times walking along the streams, going hiking in the woods, with friends, without friends, alone. We get lost. We climb a tree. We find our way back. Learning all these things, catching fish, going to Budladek, staying on the island as a child, and you see the natural systems that occur on an island at that time. You watch the stars, and you start to see, you build a repertoire of traditional knowledge as a Mi'kmaq child, and you build a repertoire of traditional knowledge. So you even though you don't know it, you are acquiring traditional knowledge. You learn things. And I went to be a college student at the age of 36. And when I was in high school, I graduated in 1981. I tried to get into university, but I became a parent in my final year of high school, and my averages went down below university level, and no university would take me. I had great marks before that. I was a pretty decent student, and I had good marks, but they wouldn't accept me because my mark went low. And I tried to explain to the deans back then. I said, I'm a parent, and I have to take care of a child and go to school, and they didn't understand that. To them, that was like a human mistake that our First Nation youth get into. It's not a mistake, man. That just happened, and I end up getting rejection letter after rejection letter. But at that time, people were saying, "Don't take the sciences. That's too hard." And I listened to them. I didn't take science, but I was good at biology, terrible at math and chemistry. And anyways, I just worked. I worked. Became a journalist. Did all these things. And then when I decided to go to school at the age of 36, Cape Breton University started a program, the MSIT program, and it was based on the concept of 2-eyed seeing, which was very new to me and very intriguing to me. And you work to get a degree in science, a Bachelor of Science in Community Studies. And I went through that program. I did so well with it. I won major awards. Yeah, but something happened. I got distracted by the workforce. I had young kids still at that age. And I had to provide for them. So in my graduating year, I left university to do work. And I felt I had to. And I left that program. But while I was in that program, we had instructors, Dr. Cheryl Bartlett, we had biology professors, we had chemistry professors, we had lab people that designed our labs, and we geared it around two-eyed seeing. And Verdina and Albert were our instructors as well. And I started to realize my childhood, my life as a Mi'kmaw person, is a strong basis and a core for science education. Because when it came time to do biology labs with these fancy tools, scalpels and all these things, we're cutting up fetal pigs, worms, frogs. It was natural for us because we cleaned fish. Some of the mothers, you know, they gave birth and all that. They understand what's going on at a young age, and they raise kids and all that stuff. So our lives as Mi'kmaw person, Mi'kmaw people, can be incorporated into a science degree. And I did so well in those biology labs. My hand-eye coordination is just precise, man. I got 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10 on my labs. And one day I asked the instructor, how come I'm not getting 10 out of 10s? She says, because your pencil is too soft. You have to use a hard pencil for your biological drawings. And I told her, you know what? I looked for that pencil at the university. You don't have it here. I went to all the office supply places. They don't have it. And she goes, what? Our university don't even have those pencils? She changed all my marks to 10 out of 10 in those labs. And I remember a time when we had this biology, third-year biology professor, and he would give us a pop quiz every now and then. And he asked us to write a quiz. He wrote on the board, feral cats. They decimate native species of birds, snakes. What can be done about feral cats? So I wrote a paper, quick paper, and I told him what I seen in nature, what I seen from pet cats, what I seen, all the things that I've seen, and I put it in there. How I found kittens in the woods, things like that. And gave me 10 out of 10. And he says, I'm glad to see that much of your learning is beyond the walls. And that's where two-eyed seeing comes in. Yes, we have our reading, our writing, the arithmetic, our formal education, but we also have the strength of our traditional knowledge, our repertoire of traditional knowledge, which occurs outside of the walls. Traditional knowledge is so important to us. And our ancestors, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, our great aunties, they are basically walking encyclopedias. They live and represent what two-eyed seeing is all about. They may not be familiar with the concept or the term, but the way they conduct themselves through life, they are walking, living, breathing examples of what two-eyed seeing is about. And it all comes down through actions and stories. Actions and stories. You ask a scholar, what is the best way to protect traditional knowledge? What is the best way to protect our traditional ways? And the scholar will tell you, oh, that's intellectual property rights. We have to do this and do that and protect this and do this that way. So you ask a scholar that, and that is what they want. You ask a practitioner of the two-eyed seeing model, a practitioner of traditional knowledge, what is the best way to protect traditional knowledge? And they will tell you, we have to take the youth out. We have to let them be part of the discussion. Let them see what's going on and let them interpret the natural world. Pass that knowledge on to them so the kids today can build a repertoire of traditional knowledge, which cannot be taught in a classroom. It can only be referenced to, but in real life, the children have to be part of that. A young lady from, I say young, but she's actually my age. She said, oh, I remember going to the islands on a canoe in Budladek, and we'd pick, my mother will, and the girls would pick gooseberries, and we would make all these wonderful things from gooseberries. I said, oh, okay, so that story you just told me, does it end with you? She goes, what do you mean? I said, do you take your children and your grandchildren out the way your mother did and your Giju did? Do you take them out and pass that knowledge on? And they said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. I said, guess what? That story is going to end with you, and that knowledge ends with you. He said, you're right. I don't want the story to end with me. I want my children. I want my children and grandchildren to say, my Giju took me here. My Giju, my mom took me here. And we did this, and we made this. We don't want it to be that my children or my grandchildren will say, oh, my mother used to come here, and she told me she did this. No, the story has to continue. The story has to continue. So the children with traditional knowledge and passing on that traditional knowledge, because it supports the two-eyed seeing concept, right? So you got to take the youth out. They have to live it, breathe it, taste it, see it, hear it, smell it, share it, honor it, and respect it. Those things are teachings you're not going to find in the classroom. Those are things you're not going to learn within the walls. You can reference them and you can study them and put them in a little nice little bullet point form and write that on the test. But if you don't actually live it or breathe it or pass it on, share it, honor it. I have a grandson who has been fishing with me from the age of 2. He's 11 now, and he's starting to notice trends. He's noticing trends. Shubenacadie River, Unama'ki, Forshoe, the Myra River, the Bredor. He's starting to notice trends in nature based on his 9 years of living it, breathing it, tasting it, sharing it, smelling it, honoring it, respecting it, because he's part of that process. And he's building a repertoire of traditional knowledge that's going to help him in the future. You know, that reading, the writing, and the arithmetic, I push that hard, man, because that's important. Our modern Western scientific education is very important. And in a two-eyed seeing model, you have to have the strength of both ways of seeing. Your modern Western scientific eye, your traditional eye. You have to be able to blend those two knowledges together to interpret the natural world, to feed yourself, your family, and your communities. In my case, all of that, plus build a management plan on moose. So the two-eyed seeing model is a very strong model once you understand it. So our youth today, there's a major distraction with electronics, multimedia, all these things, right? So you see a kid today, I said, hey, grandson, let's go fishing. And he goes like this. Click, 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 click. The face they're making, the anger, all those things. Human emotions, they're wasting it on a little screen. They said, I'm already fishing. Look, I caught a lunker. And I said, no, let's go out. Put that thing away. Take it with you because you need the GPS and you need that to call 911 if we get in trouble. But don't use your electronics. You're not going to learn anything about the natural world. So schools have to change. Learning environments have to change. We have to take these kids out. Kids in up north, they get a 2-week goose break to hunt geese, traditionally hunt geese. Kids in PEI get a potato break. Why don't the kids in Unama'ki in Nova Scotia, in all our districts, get a moose break? Learn about hunting moose. Learn the concept of Netukulimk, Nogama, Mi'kmaw natural law, all these things. So I will end this two-eyed seeing talk on a story, a legend. And it highlights the strengths of traditional knowledge and modern Western scientific knowledge. So it goes back, this story, a long, long time ago. And in the time of the Ice Age, I would imagine, it was at a time where our ancestors, the Ilnu of the land, the humans of the land, the Ilnu, were trying to survive in a very harsh environment. We had mastodons, we had the short-faced bear, we had the dire wolf, we had the saber-toothed cat, the giant beaver, the giant squirrel. A lot of these animals were big and fierce, and our people went out to harvest to feed themselves, but it was hard for them because they would become food to these giant predators. And our ancestors said, it's time for prayer. We have to pray for change. We have to pray for a different way. So they prayed to the Creator. They asked the Creator for help. And the Creator sent Glooscap to help. Glooscap is not God, but does the work of the Creator. And Glooscap will change the flow of a river for the Ilnu, the human of the land. Glooscap will change the landscape for our survival, the humans, the Ilnu. And Glooscap so loved the Ilnu, and in this case, Glooscap said he was going to change the animals. So Glooscap took the short-faced bear, lovingly petted it, and stroked it till it became the modern bear of today, a smaller, more efficient animal. Done so with the dire wolf, saber-toothed cat, the giant beaver, the squirrel, and changed them to a smaller, more efficient animal, and told these animals, you must now serve the humans and not to cause harm or fear. And they said, okay, we'll do that. And the humans have to respect the animals. And today, if you see a bear, you're lucky to see a bear. 9 times out of 10, that bear is going to disappear before you even know there's a bear there. And animals will stay away from you, but they will present themselves as food if you respect and honor them and use prayer. And things were great for our ancestors. They were able to survive, and they were able to use and engage the concept of Netukulimk, love and respect of the natural world, love and respect of the resource, that it was like an ancient agreement. We were able to get along and we were able to survive. And if you look at that story, it's the story of evolution told in a very colorful way. And it's told by a voice more ancient than mine. It's told by a grandmother or an aunt or a great aunt or a great grandfather sitting at a shoreline with a fire going, and the sights, the sounds, the smells of nature are all incorporated in that storytelling. It goes into your long-term memory and it's passed on. So that is my traditional eye wide open, my traditional story. As a traditional person, I can get away with telling that story, no problem. But in today's world, I have 2 sets of toolboxes, man. I have my traditional repertoire of traditional knowledge, but I also have my modern Western scientific toolbox. And if you look what happened in Debert, Nova Scotia, they found a stone hide scraper sitting in a hearth, and they found out that that stone hide scraper was sitting there for a very long time. They radiocarbon dated the materials around that scraper and found out that that stone hide scraper, held by our ancestors, was sitting there for 10,600 radiocarbon years. And if you translate that into calendar years, that's 11 to 14,000 calendar years. So here you have a stone hide scraper and a science story that makes my ancestors eyewitnesses to the extinction of the megafauna, where those animals change from large and fierce to smaller. You also have my traditional story, the legend that tells of the changing of the animals, how Glooscap changed these animals, which shows that we are eyewitnesses to that changing of the megafauna, the extinction of the megafauna. I have 2 stories. I have a traditional story that's backed by science. Science backs up my traditional story. Isn't that great? That's strong, man. That's powerful. On an equal note, I have a science story, you know, the radiocarbon dating of the materials of a stonehide scraper sitting there 11 to 14,000 calendar years. I have a science story that's backed by traditional knowledge. You know how powerful that is, man? That's powerful. In the Tuaitsean model, both stories have equal merit and both stories have equal strength. I hope that helps people understand what traditional knowledge is all about.
Thank you, Clifford. I know that
Tuaitsean, yeah.
I know that we're supposed to wrap up around 3, and we'll try to do that for everyone. But we have some really great questions, so I want to give an opportunity for you to answer some of those questions. The one that I didn't pose when Trevor was on the line, and
sure,
you can't see it, but Trevor did have to leave, and he thanks everyone so much for the opportunity to speak, and he encourages everyone to learn a little bit more about Mi'kmawey Debert. But the reason why I kind of paused this question and thought it would be good for you is it makes me think of like the eagle sanctuary. I think when we had that meeting before about eagles, and also with our traditional moose hunt that we had in parks. This question that was asked was, how does modern technology apply to hunting and fishing impact Nadumalik?
Yeah, you know what? Our treaties evolve. Our relationship evolves. We've got people who don't understand treaty and don't understand Mi'kmaq way of life, and they'll say, oh, you can't use an ancient treaty to hunt and fish with modern methods. And I'm telling them, hold on, man. Are you telling me to go back? That's like telling you, you have to go back, because that we are all treaty people. We are treaty. We've evolved. You've evolved. The methods have evolved. So to tell me I can't hunt, I have to hunt according to treaty the way we did back and then, that is too simplistic a way. We evolve. Our interpretation of the natural world evolves. We have the strengths of traditional knowledge. We have the strengths of Tuaitsean. We have the strength of Netukulimk, and we can do that in a way that embraces modern technology and embraces those teachings.
Perfect. And I see we have a reminder that we have 5 minutes left, so I don't know technology if it's going to cut us off. If it does, folks who are on the line, apologies. I'm going to blend 2 questions from Liesl and Leah together. Both non-Indigenous researchers and professors at the university, and they're just wondering about how they can incorporate Tuaitsean into their coursework. What are some tools or resources that they can access for trying to use that in what they're teaching, given that they haven't lived this experience themselves?
Yeah, the great thing is at UINR, at CMM, Mi'kmawey Debert, KMKNO, we have resource people that can come in and help you with that, or you can bring them in and they can talk about these stories, these legends, and as inquiring minds you have as young students, they can look these up and see how they fit and see how Tuaitsean can apply. It all starts with the storytelling, you know. All these stories and legends are based in science. They're based on observation. Our medicines, our way of life, our survival techniques, they all pass the rigorous laboratory of survival. All our medicines, the dosages, when to take them, when to harvest them, how to prepare them. All these things were done without Bunsen burners and test tubes. And you look at what's going on in Membertou now, we have elders working with the college, working with the chemistry people, making a medicine out of birch bark, which helps with skin ailments. And it's a really powerful medicine. We all know the story of, what's that cough syrup that tastes really bad?
Buckley's.
Buckley's. That was a pharmacist who spoke with Membertou harvesters and Membertou people, how they treated their colds, because nobody was walking around with a runny nose and all that. Oh, we used parts of the tree. Buckley's took that and they made $1 billion out of our traditional knowledge just from one casual conversation. So we have to be very careful on how we bring these knowledges in. What can we share? What we can't share? What we're willing to share? And if you look at UI and our education stuff, it's on our website. We have all these booklets, traditional knowledge of eels, traditional knowledge of salmon, striped bass, cod, moose. Our elders put those together. Our harvesters put those together, and they decided what they want to share with the rest of the world and what they don't want to share. So that information was reviewed by the people that provided it, and they allowed for edits of what can be used, what to change, delete, and they're wonderful, wonderful pieces of work. So they can look at uinr.ca, and we have these traditional knowledge books online that they can use them right in the classroom and discuss them from a traditional knowledge perspective and from a modern Western scientific perspective. Bring in people who can do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Clifford. And for those who are at Acadia, you can reach out to me directly if you need support for having individuals to come in and speak to your classroom or find some of those materials. I do want to acknowledge, I know we have a lot of Mi'kmaw who are actually participating and listening to this session from all across Mi'kmawey. So I want to thank all of them because they all are phenomenal resources themselves on different topics. And we actually have one Mi'kmaw youth that has posed a question and asked how they can apply two-eyed seeing and stop the imposter syndrome that they feel sometimes in post-secondary. So how would you respond to that, Clifford?
I always say you have to work with the knowledge keepers. The knowledge keepers today have those two sets of toolboxes, and the knowledge keepers are the ones who can teach these ways by including you, not within the walls. Within the walls, if somebody can teaches this within the walls and talks about it and say they are experts at it, what have they done outside the walls, outside of science experiments and things like that? What have they done as harvesters, as food providers? What is where did they build the repertoire of traditional knowledge? So like you know, Sabrina, you have access to all these people in our communities who you know represent both or strongly represent one and can work with somebody in science, and they can blend their knowledges together. It's incredible what's going on in striped bass management on the Shubenacadie River because of their work with First Nation communities, because the observations of our First Nation communities really help. And in the two-eyed seeing model, First Nation observations are strong, and non-First Nation observations are strong. Two-eyed seeing is all about the incorporation of traditional knowledge. It's not wholly owned and controlled by Aboriginal people, because non-Aboriginal people have traditional knowledge as well. That's important in the two-eyed seeing process.
We have another question, and I know you've had experience, you've done travels to Newfoundland, but I know both you and I, having worked with negotiations of our treaty rights, we might not be sure how we want to respond to this question, but I'll read it to you anyways.
Yep.
What would be your suggestion for Mi'kmaw and what is now Newfoundland for using jurisdiction to achieve Mi'kmaw management of moose or caribou when the Newfoundland government does not currently recognize Mi'kmaw rights or treaty in the province?
Yeah, the thing is, the traditional knowledge is going to be lost, and the Mi'kmaw have to step up. They have to use these Supreme Court decisions and say, we've been harvesting moose since time immemorial. We've been harvesting caribou since time immemorial. We have to be part of the management plan. And it's going to take a lot of work from their leadership to stand up and say, it's time to assert our jurisdiction, assert our treaty rights, and Follow the path of the Mi'kmaq Grand Council. Ask the Grand Council, the traditional leadership. People say, oh, what have the Grand Council done for us lately? I said, guess what? They were defendants of the treaty. Their job is to protect the nation and to maintain the faith. Part of that is to become defendants. So if there are Grand Council members in Newfoundland, if not, the traditional leadership there, the elected leadership there, got to have a conversation with the Grand Council and start talking to these traditional leaders and work from there. My Grand Chief, Donald Marshall, organized our first harvest, and it was brutal, man. The treatment our hunters received. I know, I was a journalist at that time. I photographed it. I covered it. I went to the trials. It was brutal, man. But our treaties are powerful. We didn't walk around with treaty papers in our pocket asking to sign treaties. The British Crown couldn't defeat us in war. They asked us to sign a treaty of peace and friendship so that we both can live in peace and friendship. Newfoundland just has to be reminded that these treaties are valid, existed, and still in.
There we go. I was muted, but I think I'm unmuted now. There's some tech stuff going on. Sorry, folks. But the next question we have is about, I'm just trying to look at it. Sorry, we're having tech things going on, folks, so it's just distracting me at the moment. But the next question says, I am Indigenous, but not Mi'kmaq, and therefore I found my suggestions from an Indigenous lens within the education system are not valued or often even acknowledged. How can I be more effective for influencing positive changes for our Indigenous learners?
Good question. You're Indigenous, but you're not Indigenous to here. You have the benefit of teachings that can assist Mi'kmaq people. You have the benefit of teachings that can assist non-Mi'kmaq people. Stand strong and proud of your heritage. Express in creative ways how you can do that. How you can share the richness of your language and your knowledge into the education system. We're very lucky when we started this 1999, 2000, that we were very lucky we had a system in place that we built. And back then,
You're still good, Clifford.
Okay, so back then, our fellow students were saying, you know what, I'm having a hard time trying to explain 2IC to these professors here. Some of them are just throwing it away and not accepting this. And I tell them, you know what, your life as a Mi'kmaq person is important. Your life as an Aboriginal person is important. Just do your work. Just do your work. You don't have to explain anything to anybody. You don't have to ask them to accept it. You do your work and let your work speak for itself. And guess what? My fellow students have done that, and they have moved on to great things. And just continue to do your work and let it speak for itself.
And I have two last questions because I know we're over time, but I think these are ones really quick. How are the moose of Unama'ki similar and or different from mainland moose?
Good question. Two different, our people, our harvesters call them tribes. And the ones we have in Cape Breton were brought in from Elk Island National Park. Scientifically, they're called Alces andersoni. And the native moose we have here were called Alces americana. Two different subspecies, two different tribes. And what happened in Unama'ki was in the 1800s, they were exploited, they were overhunted. People on ships were killing them, taking the hides, leaving the bodies along the shoreline. Oh, it was a real mess. And the moose left us. There was no moose left. So when they built the national park in 1940s, they brought in moose from Elk Island National Park to repopulate. So the moose in Cape Breton are biologically different than the ones in the mainland. They're two different subspecies.
And the last question is, if we are trying to confirm a trend in salmon stocks, isn't it better to conduct a controlled quantitative study rather than rely on anecdotal experience, even if it's 9 years worth?
Well, you know, that 9 years worth of experience is probably 1,000 years old because it's passed on and it's passed on. We are survivors of climate change. We are incredible survivors of climate change. And we are hoping what's going on today, that our salmon will be the same, that they will be incredible survivors of climate change and everything within that ecosystem. Because one thing is everybody's talking about harvesting, but nobody's talking about changes in the environment. So even today's closure on salmon, that's based on information that's pretty old, scientific information that's old. Let's blend them together and let's work together and let us come up with a management plan for salmon that includes our involvement, our ways, because let's look at my grandson, for example. He can be a scientist. He has all the tools to become a great scientist. He also has all the tools to become a great harvester and a traditional knowledge holder and a knowledge keeper. When he grows up, he can become a scientist. I'm saying, when you grow up, why don't you be both? Be that harvester and be the scientist. That way you can blend your traditional knowledge with your modern Western scientific knowledge. You're able to use trends and understand trends from your own perspective and from people older than you who have been involved in salmon, and blend that with science. You know, blend it with science. Have DFO, have DNR, learn about our ways. Let them have all these Mi'kmaw courses and things where they start to understand and realize the strengths of traditional knowledge combined with modern Western scientific knowledge, that we have the ability to blend them, to weave them into something tangible. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Clifford. That's all the questions that we have. It's an honor, as always, to have you speak. I'm so appreciative that you took my offer to come in and do this session with us. There's a number of people before we wrap up that I just want to acknowledge and thank. So again, I just have to reiterate my appreciation to Community Culture Heritage within the province of Nova Scotia for providing us the funds to be able to have all of these speakers come forward today and in the next 2 weeks. I really have to give thanks to a lot of people on campus, in particular Sherry Turner, who has done all of the support for communications and setting up all of these sessions. Without her, none of this would have been possible, so thank you so much. And to the team that made today possible in the back end, Natalie, Mary, Mark, we also had Grant and Karen from IT. Thank you so much. Again, all of you folks who are on the call and participating, you wouldn't have had a session if it weren't for those individuals who I've just acknowledged. So thank you so much. Coming up in this speaker series tomorrow is all about powwow protocol. We're also talking about regalia and dress. We have 3 speakers for tomorrow. Next week on Monday, we have Gerald Glow talking about place names and landscape. And later that same day, we have 2 speakers, Lorraine Whitman and Sarah McDonald, talking about the communities of Glooscap and Annapolis Valley, which are the 2 Mi'kmaw communities surrounding Acadia University. So you just learn a little bit about those communities that interact the most with the university. And then at the end of the month, we will be having Olympian Juanique Horn Miller, who's Mohawk, talking about culture and racism in athletic and sport. So we really hope that people can tune in to those sessions. If you're not able to, it is all being recorded, and you can find that information later, or these recordings later, on the Indigenous Affairs page of Acadia. And if you have further questions or need access to more resources, I know there's been questions coming in about it, please contact me and I can send that information out to you. And as one of the comments said, we will also try to post all of those different resources, like CMM, which is the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaw, Mi'kmawey Debert, KMKNO, as well as Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources, where Clifford works, MK, all of these phenomenal bodies that exist within our governance structure in Nova Scotia. We'll post that on the Indigenous Affairs website too, so that everyone has access to the phenomenal work that's being done in Mi'kmawgi in particular in Nova Scotia. So again, thank you everyone, and have a great day.